I'm Baxter, and I'm here to talk to you today about migrations to Microsoft 365. So there's lots of things to think about in a migration, but where do we start? We start where we want to end up, so the objective. Where are we trying to move this stuff to and why? So how do you want your employees to work in modern work and digital workplace? What do you want them to be able to achieve more easily? For a lot of our customers, this is the Microsoft 365 landscape. That is the North Star of where they want to be, and the suite of tools there will help their employees. Very often they're moving from third-party licenses or older versions of SharePoint onto Microsoft 365. When you do that, you need to work out how you want your employees to work, or better still, how your employees want to work. So are you going to have open channels like Yammer, SharePoint intranets that are sharing information across the organization? And do you also have more closed teams for productivity, which might be also on SharePoint, Planner, and Microsoft Teams? So figure out what your digital workplace landscape looks like, where you want to end up before you start moving. And then you ought to be able to gather as much information on what you're migrating in its current state. So in the example of a previous SharePoint farm or a previous version of SharePoint 2010, for example, on-prem, I would run an analysis tool. People like ShareGate and Metalogix do a good job of automating this for you, and you get back a huge amount of data telling you where the sites are, how many site owners there are, whether it was recently used, how much data is in there, and what type of data. And that can help us think, okay, where are we mapping this to, why, and actually, most important, is what do we not want to migrate? People often spend too much time thinking about what they do want to migrate. What do we want to leave behind? Because you don't want to pollute this new system just by migrating all of the old stuff that no one's reading, it's not relevant, and shucking it into your new lovely environment. So at WM, we have a rule of thumb, and it is a rule of thumb, but I would encourage you to start thinking 80-20 as a starting point. I want to migrate 20% of the relevant content that people are actually using, and I want to leave behind the bulk of it. Okay, now we're into the meat of it. We're looking at the execution of the migration. And we divide this up into 3 areas. Planning and pathways, so deciding which sites are being retired, which sites are migrating, and how those sites are being migrated is our pathways. And we have things like lift and shift migration, where it's simple, the tools can just take the files from the old environment into the new. We have more complex things where you think you're going to have to rebuild it. You have fresh, which is just create it brand new in the environment, don't bother migrating the data because the use case is still there but the data's old. Or we have delete or archive, depending on what governance you have. So figuring out those pathways, we normally have around 5 or 6, and which sites are going to go through those pathways is very important. And then you can start to divide and conquer with different streams of the project, so you're not having to do everything one after the other. So that's number 1, is planning and pathways. Number 2 is the technical migration. This is where most of the hard work is done. We use tools to automate simple sites, but we have to use occasionally rebuilding, customization, and configuration to get the best setup. And remember what I said about planning, you might find that what used to be a SharePoint site in 2010 now could be a Power Apps, or now could be a Teams apps. It's not just like for like if you want to get the best out of your investment in Microsoft 365. And lastly, be wary of the person who promises you a very, very simple migration process where everything comes across automated perfectly. You will need QA, you will need validation periods where site owners can go and check everything's okay. And if you need to make tweaks or worst case roll back, you need to make sure that's part of your process and you have a technical team there to manage that. And to recap, we want to look at the desired end state first before we plan anything. We want to go through the analysis period to work out what we're bringing, why, and where. And then you want to execute the migration. And if you follow our 3 cornerstones of migration planning and pathways, technical migration, and change and adoption, you shouldn't go too far wrong. And finally, my number 1 top tip is, of course, give us a call.